Welcome and thanks for joining us on episode number 280 of the Financially Independent Teachers Podcast. If you think your story could help other educators and you'd be willing to come on the show, please check out our webpage at financiallyindependentteachers.com and fill out the form to come on the show. And man, am I happy that Todd filled out the form to come on the show. Todd is kind of new to FIT, but he saw the post online that we're looking for teachers that wanted to share their story, not to brag, but to carve out a path maybe for other teachers that don't think that it can be done. And honestly, I think this might be a record for the show. Now we had Brian Preston from the Money Guys on the podcast, and he has a net worth of $10 million plus. But he obviously is a financial planner. He's a big shot there in Nashville, Tennessee. He's never been a teacher. But we've got Todd in California, and I just want to kind of tease you a little bit here. We'll let him go into the detail, but I think it's our first ever teacher that has a net worth that I can remember on our show, previous 279 episodes, that has a net worth above $5 million. So, Todd, I cannot wait to hear your story. And I'm so thankful that you're willing to share it with our audience here on the Fit Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to set this up. I think it's really valuable for teachers to learn that there's different ways than just white knuckling and holding on. And if they look at their pension as instead of like their whole retirement, but they look at it as almost like a safety net under them and they are encouraged to take a little bit of risk. They can realize that they can guarantee a very comfortable minimum retirement standard with that pension and now Social Security. But then you can also reach for the stars and hopefully hit a couple of home runs with your investing in either rental real estate or the stock market or other things, right? So looking at that pension as a safety net instead of just the retirement.
I think that's one thing that I've shifted. I'm 44 now, Todd, and my plan is to retire at 50. Who knows? Things could change, but my youngest, will graduate when I turn 50, and then I'll be eligible to collect that pension check of about $40,000 a year here in North Carolina. But, people ask all the time, well, hey, when you retire, are you going to go ahead and move more into bonds and things like that? And my answer is always heck no, because I've
Okay.
got that pension working for me. And that I view that as my safe stuff, which enables us to take our money and be a little more aggressive with rental real estate properties or, keeping things still 100% in equities when it comes to our 401ks and Roth IRAs. But let's get back to the beginning of this. You've got a net worth of, 5 million plus. Is this something that was acquired due to your wife and you guys maybe playing the lottery? Maybe there were other teachers at your school and everybody chipped into the lottery. And sure enough, you guys hit big and you each split, $1 million or something. Or, did you grow up with a silver spoon in your mouth? Or maybe your wife did and you guys had an inheritance. How the heck do you guys get a net worth of 5 million plus and you're barely 50 years old?
I wish it was an easy story like that, but it wasn't. My wife grew up and she was actually homeless when she was 17 years old. I was a, cornfield kid from the Midwest outside about 45 minutes to an hour outside of Chicago. Grew up with like you get your, one or two pair of jeans for your school year and your shoes, and by the end of the school year, you've got a hole where your big toe was and in your knee. So like we never went hungry, but we definitely weren't um, living the good life. And when my wife and I went to college together, or I met my wife in college, and the way I met her is for Thanksgiving break and Christmas break when everybody else was going home, we were the ones that stayed behind because we didn't have the money to travel back and forth. And so we were raiding the common refrigerators and eating ramen noodles together and kind of hanging out that way. And that's kind of how we got to know each other. And then after we graduated, we both decided, hey, we don't want to live the way we grew up. So let's really hunker down and focus on like doing what we can. And we started buying our first rental home and our first home and investing in the stock market. And we just really we worked two jobs, sometimes three. And for the first 10 years, we didn't have kids and we just worked and saved and invested. Things started to work out from there. Right.
So where'd you guys go to college?
We both went to Arizona State. She was actually my RA, my resident advisor. She was supposed to be keeping me out of trouble and she liked the
As I
job.
say, was she letting you sneak in beer, Todd, or what?
Definitely might have let me sneak a few questionable beverages into the dorm, and thank goodness for it. but yeah, so she's been taking care of me since the day she met me, basically.
That's
Um,
awesome. We went, gosh, probably about 10 years ago. Ohio State played Clemson in the college football playoffs. My wife surprised me. I'm a huge Buckeye fan and, got the tickets, got the flight. It was New Year's Eve. So you can imagine how expensive all that was, only to see Ohio State lose like 31 to nothing. They didn't even put up a point on the scoreboard. I think they kicked a field goal and missed it. And it was New Year's Eve. And we're like, ah, what the heck? We're in Arizona. Let's go out. We don't have the kids. And sure enough, we were there. We went to Tempe or whatever and went
yeah, the
down.
Mill Avenue.
Yeah, there. And my wife and I, we sat back and we just were enjoying the scenes. I think she was checking everybody out more than I was. We were just laughing because, we're probably 35 years old and we're like, my God, there's just people dancing up on tables and bars. And if you do any research, you'll know that Arizona State is consistently ranked as one of the top 5 party schools in the country.
I definitely wasn't bored when I went there, and for another podcast, but there's a good story how I picked the school one day. I'll tell you guys, but it
That's
definitely wasn't
awesome.
because of their educational prowess. Yeah.
So you and your wife, you graduate from Arizona State. Great place to be out there. What was the student loan debt situation like? Did you guys have financial aid, or was there help from family? Work
Now,
study? How'd you guys get through?
financial aid and working, we both, worked jobs. I went to school. My wife was an RA, and then she was like the golf cart driver for the injured athletes, and so she was on like the work study program to get paid and everything. And then I worked at restaurants and bars. And then I joined a fraternity, and I always took a leadership role because if you took a leadership role, you got your dues and housing expenses paid for. So I was like house manager and VP of finance and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, we made college work. We when we graduated, I think we had $37,000 in student loan debt, and we had a lot of credit card debt because both of us had credit cards. And so there's been 2 times in our life where we took on credit card debt and we've paid it off and haven't touched it since we had our kids. So we
Wow.
still use our credit cards for the points, but we paid off those credit cards after college, and then when we had kids, we took on some credit card debt again and made that a priority, paid it off. So I haven't paid a penny of interest on a credit card swipe in over a decade, and I never will again.
So
It's
that
like a
that goes to show how good of a recruiter you are. I mean, your then girlfriend, now wife, was helping the injured D1 athletes there, and she still picked you, the fraternity guy.
somehow, yes.
And here you are, worth more money than probably some of those former athletes are. But you guys end up making the decision, I guess. Was it immediate to move to California? Can you talk about
No, so
your teaching
after
teaching career and all that?
Yeah, so you talked a little bit about the salary back where you teach at, and I graduated from Arizona, and a teacher in Arizona was making less money than I was making as a bartender. So I was like, "What? This is stupid. Like, why the hell did I get this damn degree?" And I went to a job fair, and there was a school district in Texas there, and they were offering like I think it was like $48,000, a $5,000 signing bonus, and then they would pay to move us. And neither one of us were from Texas, and I looked at my then girlfriend, and I was like, I think I got to take this job out in Texas. Like, do you want to come with? And she said yes. And we moved out to Texas, and I taught there. And she was a secretary at a tile company, and I was waiting tables at night and coaching sports. And she started waiting tables, and we scratched together our first down payment. We bought our first little house there in Hurst, Texas. Um, and you just lived there for 5 years, and then after 5 years of being there, my wife was like, I don't really think Texas is where I want to call home. And I was like, well, you followed me out to Texas, so I'll follow you wherever you want to go. And thank goodness she was much smarter than me. She picked San Diego, and we moved out there in 2005. And it's been the second best decision I ever made was moving to San Diego.
Could you imagine when you guys are waiting tables and you're in Texas? I mean, you moved to Texas to make 48,000 a year. It's not like you moved to Texas to make 6 figures. You moved to Texas to make 48 grand, hopped over multiple states there to do it. Could you ever imagine yourself, the Todd that was maybe, I don't know, 25, 26 or whatever back then, that you'd be on a financial podcast right now sharing with other teachers that you're worth over $5 million?
No, when I was growing up, I thought like my ambition was let me get a nice little 18, 19 foot V-hole Lund fishing boat and a truck to tow it and enough money to buy some old style to go drink some beer while I go fishing. Like that was my ambition. My wife thought she was always wanted to live in the penthouse in New York City, like so her ambition really kind of pushed me and propelled me to kind of always try to do more instead of just being comfortable, thank goodness. So I would have never guessed that I would be in the position that I'm in now back then. But it's like an incremental, like you're walking up the steps and you feel like, oh my gosh, I still got that far to go to get to the top. You just keep putting one foot in front of the next and eventually you'll get there. And a big thing for me is that pension, like that safety net that's under us. I have a lot of friends in education that have just used that as like their goal. And I looked at that as my safety net. So if I fall, that's always there to catch me. If I make a mistake, I could always work 5 more years if I have to, because teaching's not so demanding that I can't do it into my 60s or my 70s. And so, realizing that safety net was under there and taking that and using that to take the risk was, you know, huge.
Let's backtrack a little bit to Texas. You bought that first house together, making the big income there, the 48,000, and your wife, you guys are doing the waiting tables and all that kind of stuff. Did you end up keeping that house or did you sell it before you headed to San
Yeah.
Diego?
So that was one of the deals, one of the agreements that my wife and I had is we were going to acquire assets. And so we had to make the decision to either keep the house in Texas or sell it. And at the time, we decided let's just turn it into a rental and we'll move to California and we'll save enough money to buy our first house out there. So that's what we did. And we turned that house into a rental. And I don't have that same house today. I still have rentals that I owned from back then, but that was a big decision. It was a huge chunk of money that we made off of that house by keeping it and turning it into a rental. So,
It's a challenge I always have for people on the show, or at least talk about every now and again. My wife's a real estate agent. And I always say, what if you're a teacher or a teacher couple and you do want to upgrade a little bit? You had like a starter home or whatever. Now you have a family, you've got more kids, you need a little more room. What if you just kept the house that you did own first and then you're able to put down as little as maybe 3.5%, and then you keep that as a rental, and then you upgrade and you buy the next house versus what most people do is they immediately like, hey, let's sell it, let's get as much equity out of that so we can just use it as the down payment. Well, you're stretching out a mortgage over 30 years anyway. So what if you kept that first property and you let tenants pay it down over the course of a 15 to 25-year period? That could be your kid's college, that could be something that you sell, or you could do a 1031 tax exchange one day and have a vacation home. That's a great decision that you had.
yeah, so OPM, other people's money. Got to learn how to use it. That's how rich people live. They don't live off of their salary. They live off other people's money. So they acquire assets and then they take loans against those assets. So if you can get other people to go to work every day to pay for your assets, it's a no-brainer. The catch is you've got to have the emergency fund to cover it because we
Yeah.
did take on one tenant that didn't pay. And the funny thing is in Texas, like you can get someone evicted and they don't have to go. And so we went through the whole process of getting them evicted, called up the sheriff's department. They're like, yeah, it's probably going to be another 6 months before we get to you. So I actually had to call the guy up and I'm like, listen, dude, if I give you $2,000 and rent you a U-Haul truck, will you go? You're evicted. You're going to get sent gone, like, will you go? And he said yes. So I flew from Texas, or I flew from California out to Texas. Showed up to the front door, told the guy, "Hey, here's the 2 grand, here's the U-Haul truck," and he's like, "Oh, can you come back tomorrow?" Long story short, he took the money, he moved out, and we got it figured out. But there was about 6 months there where I was covering my my mortgage in California because I had a house at the time and my house in Texas. And if I didn't have that emergency fund, it would have been a gnarly situation.
Yeah, it could be a nightmare really quick if you're not prepared. Again, that's another safety net. You talk about the pension being a safety net. I think one of the first things a young teacher should do, or any teacher at any age, is you've got to build that emergency fund. Can
Yeah,
you
you got
cover
to
your
have six
deductibles?
months.
Yeah, 6 months is a great place to be. And I hear teachers all the time. I made a post earlier on our social media page, basically saying there's two types of teachers. There's the type of teacher that says, we don't get paid what we're worth. and I'm going to get online. I'm going to moan and complain about it. And then in my 60s and 70s, I'm going to still complain about, the lawmakers that didn't give me the salary I should have had. Or there's teachers that understand, yes, we should get paid more, but I'm going to go ahead and do something about it. And I'm going to wait tables. I'm going to bartend. I'm going to paint. I'm going to cut grass. At the end of the day, you're in control of your own life. We're live and on stage every day. Life isn't a dress rehearsal. So even though I think I deserve to get paid more in North Carolina, yeah, sure, I can vote, but my vote isn't going to probably make that much of a change. But I can be in control of my own life. And I do get 2 months off in the summer to create some of these other streams of income. I know you're big on streams of income.
Yeah, so there's two things that like I learned in college that really changed my life financially. And one of them is this concept of having multiple legs on your stool to hold you up. So if your paycheck is your only financial leg on your like financial stool, and your paycheck can go away for any reason, you get sick, injured, somebody at work screws up, you screw up, whatever it is, then you're falling flat on your ass. But if you have multiple legs of income, well, then you can still stay standing when one of those legs, disappears, and so having those multiple legs in the stool is critical. And then the second thing is Monday through Friday, 8 in the morning to 5 at night, that's maintaining your status quo. That's for maintaining your life as it is today. And if you're happy with that life, then great. Enjoy your nights and weekends doing whatever it is that makes you happy. But if you want something more, your nights and weekends is when you can go out and get more. And teaching, if you do it right, gives you a lot of nights and weekends off. And even the summertime, you've got a lot of time off too. So I definitely leverage that to build other streams of income, build assets that was transformative. So those two concepts made a huge change for me.
So, how long have you been teaching and what do you teach?
So I started teaching in 2000 in Texas, and I've been teaching now for 26 years, and I teach personal finance, entrepreneurship, and then technology. But I've taught everything from typing to business to video production, you name it. But like I've always been in the technology and business sector.
Gotcha. And what is somebody in year 26 in your district near San Diego making? And are you aware of what a beginning teacher salary in your district's paying?
Yeah, so I've got my master's degree, and with my step and everything, I'm just over 100 on my regular salary schedule. And then I'm a person that believes in making yourself needed, and so I always do above and beyond. I do other things for the school district. And then when they start to rely on those things, then they need you. And so they give me 6/5 to compensate me for that need. So they give me an extra class a lot of times. So I get an extra 20% pay many years. And then other times it's like, hey, you guys are complaining about this workflow or this system that's really slow and archaic. Well, I like technology, so I can digitize it and automate it and give you back some time and give you the data that you need. And so then they'll pay me for that too. So
Gotcha. Do you know what a first year teacher maybe in the district is? You think it's over
I don't
50 or?
I don't know off the top of my head. It's been a long time since I've had to worry about
Yeah,
that. But I think it is like right around it's under 60. I think it's like maybe high 40s, maybe mid 50s, something like that.
gotcha. And are you in San Diego, like inside the city limits where you live? What does it look like?
Yeah, I'm in
You
San
know,
Diego County. I'm about 20 minutes from downtown San Diego, if you know it. I'm in the Grossmont School District. We've got 10 or 11 high schools. We don't do middle school or grade school. So I live in a very suburban area, so not
what
it's
does the
not.
house look like? Are you like the 5,000 square foot house? You're the multimillionaire.
So we first had a little like 4 bedroom, like 1,800 square, like two super tiny little like bedrooms, but we had four of them. And then I, just like everybody else that was doing real estate during the great financial crisis, I had a bunch of mortgages and a bunch of second mortgages on a bunch of rental properties. And I looked at the way that these big guys were making the banks refinance them, and take the big guys were getting haircuts on their debt, and the banks were, only, keeping the loan at 70 cents in the dollar or something like that. So I did a little bit of research, and I was like, okay, I've got 5 mortgages with Wells Fargo. I wonder what would happen if I took all of my savings and bought my like dream house and then stopped paying on all of those mortgages that are now rentals, and use that leverage to have the banks like rewrite my seconds and lock in my interest rates at fixed rates instead of variable rates. And it was a pretty tough thing to get my wife to agree to do, but we did it. And in 2013, I went and I bought the biggest, nicest house I could afford with every penny I had socked away in my mutual funds in the stock market. And I stopped paying on all of my mortgages. And luckily during that, like the banks were like 6, 8, 10 months before they even realized that someone wasn't paying. And so I was just stacking those rent checks every month. And then when the bank said, "Hey, why aren't you paying?" I was like, "Well, I've got these variable rate mortgages. They're going up. I can pay. Here's the cash in the bank. Here's the leases. Rewrite these things just like you're doing for all the big real estate developers out there." And they basically laughed in my face. And then I was probably like 4 or 5 months later, they're like, "We're getting ready to foreclose on you. Do you want to pay this?" And I'm like, "Great. Here's all the foreclosure records of the houses like that I have in the air in these areas. You I owe you $700,000 on this house, and it just got foreclosed on one down the street for 180,000. Like, do you want me to pay? If you do, refinance me and give me 30-year fixed rates." And they actually agreed to do it. So they took a haircut on 90 cents in the dollar on all my seconds. I had to pay off the balance in cash. And then they locked me in on 30-year fixed rates on my primary mortgages on those properties. And I started paying, and was a very transformative thing for me. But
Wow.
that was
What a
in 20,
risk. That
it was
scares the
huge.
mess out of me, Todd.
Well, but so I looked at it this way. I have cars, I have homes, I have real estate. I if I have all of those things, what do I need credit for? So like I'm not
If your
worried about
credit got ruined, you already
yeah,
have a house. You're not going to
yeah,
get
I've
kicked
got
out of your.
everything. I've got
Yeah.
jobs and everything. I'm like, why not take the risk? And so I did it. And our credit got absolutely destroyed. I went from having over an 800 credit score to having like a 300 credit score, but it didn't affect me because I wasn't needing credit at that time. I had just bought my dream house. I had new cars and everything. And so we took that risk, and it paid off, right? And then we got into in 2013, we got into a nice like 5 bedroom, 4,000 square foot home in a really desirable area in San Diego. And since 2013 to now, the house has more than doubled. And so like that was very transformative for us too.
Do you still own those real estate properties that you took the
Yeah,
gamble on?
yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
guessing those have doubled as well.
They've done very well. The one that hasn't done great is we bought a condo in Jacksonville, Florida for my mother-in-law, at kind of like the height of the condo conversion when you were converting apartments into condominiums type thing. And we that one was a big loser for us, but when they wiped out the second mortgage and then locked in the low 30-year rate, it's going to end up being fine, but that one hasn't really added a lot to the bottom line, just some stress, but it's going to be fine. Yeah.
Gotcha. So, what is your philosophy on paying off rental properties early? Are you someone that just, hey,
Nope,
use other
nope,
people's
nope.
money, stretch it out as long as you can?
OPM, man, OPM, because like I'm a big stock market investor too, and the stock market has just always not always, but over the long term, it's returned way more than the interest rate that I'm paying on those loans. That interest is tax deductible, so I'd rather keep my money in the markets and growing. I'm not afraid of risk the same way a lot of other people are because I view my pension and my rental properties as like the floor, so like I don't worry about putting my money into, NASDAQ companies and technology companies and disruptor companies because I have that safety net. And those investments, like I can remember buying Amazon way back in, 2013, when it was $200 a share, and that was before it did a 10x, reverse split. And I can remember buying my first Bitcoin for $600, and I was like, I was willing to take those risks because I knew I had that safety net of those rental properties, that pension under me, right?
Wow, yeah. I think a lot of teachers, it's almost like they're leaning on that pension, and that's the only thing they're hoping that's going to hold them upright. Pension and Social Security. Hey, I already know I have that. They're taking money out of every paycheck. So why would I have to do anything extra? Why would I get an investment property? Why would I invest in the 403B, the 457, the Roth IRA? You're saying that, yeah, sure, the pension's great, Social Security is great, those things should enable you to take on the risk. Obviously 2008, 2009, that was a crazy time. I
Super
don't know if
scary.
anybody could replicate that right now. Who knows? Maybe there's another housing bubble that might burst here in the near
Let's hope
future.
not.
But like, what about the teacher that's, 22, 25, they're single, they're making 50 grand a year? Do you think what you've done is it replicable now? Like, where would you start if you had a new
Yeah,
teacher on the hallway and you're a personal finance teacher? There's a new 25-year-old teacher. I'm in your school and I don't have any student loan debt. I don't have an emergency fund. Where does somebody start to try to get to your position?
the first thing you have to have an emergency fund, because what's going to happen is if you don't have an emergency fund and you just start going to buy stocks or start going to buy rental real estate or whatever, the first time that there's a disruption in your income, you've got to sell your assets at fire sale prices. So don't worry about the stock market or rental income or anything like that until you have an emergency fund. It is your superpower, right? And so I would tell teachers to, number one, get to like 2 to 3 months worth of like cash. Put it in a high yield savings account at an online bank, not something that you can go to an ATM and pull out. Like, make it intentional. Like, I have to move this money from this bank to this other bank so that I can then take it. Because if it's easy to access, people access it. So, number one, go ahead and start your emergency fund. And the way I look at it is, every time I go out to eat dinner or every time I buy a new video game or record or something like that, it winds up in the toilet or the trash can, right? And so invest in your future in the beginning for those first few years. Skip some of those dinners, skip some of those concerts. I know it's not fun, but if you do that, that money is going to be working for you for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And that's where the real power in investing comes from. So make those sacrifices early. Once you get the emergency fund, then do half and half. So every dollar that we're gonna put in the emergency fund, put 50 cents in there, and then put the other 50 cents in some income producing or appreciating asset. And it could be stocks, it could be bonds, it could be, REITs, it could be whatever, real estate investment trusts, but definitely start putting it to work for you. And don't worry about it's going up and down on a day-to-day basis. That doesn't matter. Like, you're trying to acquire assets so that one day those assets provide you a paycheck instead of your time providing you a paycheck. And so start stacking assets. If you don't know a lot about the financial markets, don't worry about it. Don't try to pick individual companies. Pick a low cost ETF like the VOO, the Vanguard for the S&P 500, or the QQQ for the NASDAQ, and just start putting money every single paycheck in there, and just forget it exists. And eventually one day, the hardest decision that you're going to have in your life is not, do I save more money? It's do I not spend this pile of money that's over here to buy that Mercedes, or to go on the big European vacation, or to take a year off and find myself. Like, that is your income for the rest of your life. And you just keep stacking assets. And don't be afraid to get an asset that's fun. So like, I had a ski boat when I was younger, and I bought that ski boat and I loved that ski boat. We used the hell out of it, but on the weekends when I wasn't using it, I would rent it out, right? So like, you can go ahead and get a trailer or a quad or a jet ski and you use it and enjoy it, but then when it's not being used, monetize it, right? You can get, like, if you're a handy person, you've got all the tools to build decks and cabinets and whatever it is. Well, you go and you build that with your time, but when it's not your time, maybe you lease those out to contractors in the air. There's all kinds of ways to make money from your assets, but you have to have the assets.
So do you still believe it's possible, for me, again, I'm not young, but we're pretending I'm the young 23, 25-year-old teacher on your hallway. Is it still possible in this economy? I see a lot of teachers out there that,
Definitely.
hey, Todd, he did this stuff, he kind of got lucky with the real estate. He took a gamble and it worked out. I can't do that. Todd, he's doing extra level stuff with investing. He's not just doing the trying out to max the Roth IRA and doing VOO. He's going above and beyond that. Is it still possible for even the person that,
Yeah,
is starting out?
and I'm going to say something maybe that's going to piss some people off.
I'm here
I
for
think
it.
I think it's easier now than it's ever been. You have access to information that you didn't have when I was starting out. Like, it was it took me hours and hours and hours to learn about the stock market, to find information, to learn how to invest, to find companies. Now it's on every YouTube video that you can look at. It's on content creators on TikTok. AI is at your fingertips. So I would have never been able to take those risks and make those choices if I didn't do the research and have the knowledge. And that knowledge is closer than it's ever been before. The other thing is when I first started investing, I had to pay $10 and $20 a trade. Now I get to invest for free, right? And so I used to have to buy a whole house to own real estate. Now you can get into these fractional ownership programs. So like that, all of these, like the doom and gloom that's out there in the news about how hard life is, pardon my French, but give me an effing break. It's never been easier for somebody to go ahead and build something and acquire assets and gather knowledge. They just have to do it.
Yeah, I think, we look at the house we bought here in Jacksonville, North Carolina. We bought it for 310,000 about 5 years ago. Now it's probably worth 500, and it had a detached three-car garage that the previous homeowner, they had finished it. They put in a shower, they put in a sink, but they just had kind of like a hangout room for their kids, some workout equipment. And my wife, who's a real estate agent, had the novel idea of, hey, why don't we go ahead and instead of it just being your football room where you drink beer, why don't we convert that into an Airbnb and try to get traveling nurses in there? So we got on Furnish Finder, we're on Airbnb, and that place makes us about $18,000 a year, and it pays for our mortgage. So we can essentially live in our house for free
Yep.
because the people living and renting the 600 square foot studio apartment above our three-car garage pay for our mortgage. You probably couldn't have done that 20 years ago because we didn't have the technology to have these websites where you could
Yep.
attract people to come stay.
And now, and if you think about it now, like how much time out of your life does that take you? It might take you a few hours a month or a few hours a quarter to manage that, you know what I mean, and clean it.
Yeah.
And once you've done it for a little while, eh, you're the extra $100 or $200 that it costs to have someone manage it for you or clean it for you becomes insignificant. So then you really don't have to put in the sweat equity anymore after you get your feet under you. You got to be willing to take a little bit of pain and discomfort for a few years in the beginning. Like be frugal, spend your nights and weekends to get a little bit extra. And instead of using that extra to reward yourself now, put that extra to work so you can reward yourself for the rest of your life.
So, we talked before the show. You seem like a pretty simple guy from the Midwest. Obviously, you talked about your wife being homeless at 17 years old. Now that you guys have, you do have kids now, right? And, things change. You got the bigger house. Now that you have acquired a significant amount of net worth, what kind of lives do you live now? Are you still living the millionaire next door lifestyle that most people would
No,
have no idea? Or are you guys splurging? Do you
no.
guys have a
I just
vacation home?
Yeah, we've got a 45-foot boat that we keep at the Marriott in San Diego Bay. It's a two-bedroom, two-bathroom boat. Some people would call it a yacht. It's a boat. We take 20, 30-day trips around the world every year. We definitely don't live the frugal lifestyle anymore. But I would never be able to do that if it wasn't for the decisions I made in my 20s and 30s, right? And I'm not going to lie. I looked at, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I bought the Dow Jones and the slow moving conservative companies in my 20s and early 30s. And when I realized, like, okay, wait a minute, I've kind of got this guaranteed baseline of income now with rental properties and my pension. At the time, we weren't guaranteed Social Security yet. We just got guaranteed Social Security last year. But like, I was like, okay, that's going to provide me a base level like lifestyle. But I'm looking at all these technology companies exploding, and I'm sitting here growing my investments at 7% a year. So I decided to, take a portion of my portfolio and roll it into the technology companies. And then I decided to take about 25% of all new dollars. And instead of buying proven companies that are, growing, I decided to start investing in disruptors. And there's this website on the CNBC, and they have this once a year thing called the Disruptor 50. And so every year I watch that Disruptor 50. I pay attention to these private companies that are doing great things and changing the way that industries work. And as soon as they go public, I try to invest in them. And as soon as that there's a newfangled thing coming out that sounds like it's going to change an existing industry for the better, I try to invest in those things. And the reality is I'll pick 20 companies and 12 or 13 of them will go down by 50% or more, but the 8 or 10 that actually work, they way more than make up for the loss that I had on the other 12. And some of them are absolutely, I've got several that are up 3 and 4,000%, and
So
so
it's
when,
almost like, in some ways, sorry to cut you short, but I just thinking about this, it almost is like your own personal mutual fund that you've created or an index fund where you're not just going all in on one. Say, hey, let's study these 20. And I understand that probably 50% of them aren't going to work. Maybe 60% of them aren't going to work. But the 40% or 35% that do work is going to well replace,
yeah,
the other ones.
exactly,
And so you're taking calculated risk on that.
exactly.
So obviously none of this is financial advice. We're not
No,
financial
I'm not
advisors
telling
here.
anyone to gamble, right? Like
So
never.
don't gamble. But I do want to ask you your opinion, but I'm giving that precursor out there so people don't say, hey, Todd told me to do this and I lost my butt. So what are your thoughts of because again, I am the lazy investor. I spend all my time on the rental properties. I do the set it and forget it. My aggressive investing, Todd, is QQQ. Say, hey, I'm going to take a little. That's my aggressive part of the portfolio over VTI or whatever.
Yeah.
What about SpaceX? We know that that recently launched and went public. What is your opinion on that company going from private to public? Is it something that's worth jumping into, in your opinion?
So, I'm in a different situation because I can be wrong. So I'll just say something. There's been two times in my life where on paper I've lost $1 million and it didn't change my day-to-day life. So I
And it
can
wasn't going to Vegas.
yeah, it was in the stock market, right? It was in the stock and housing markets, right? So I can take risks. That said, I don't think you can argue with Elon Musk's ability to like will his way to success. And with the amount of capital that he has and the amount of support that he has, uh, people don't want to like people that have assets don't want to see him fail. They're going to do what they need to do to help him succeed. Now, the valuation of SpaceX is questionable, but I got some shares in the IPO and I bought a little bit yesterday on the sell-off. I wouldn't tell anybody to put money that they need into SpaceX. That, in my opinion, would be stupid, right? I think if you need this money, if you're saving for something right now, the QQQ, the SPY are great options. Just set it and forget it. But if you're going to peel off like a little bit of a risk sleeve to your portfolio, 5% or 10% of your portfolio now that you've got it established, I don't think it's a bad idea to take a few percentage points of that risk sleeve and put it into SpaceX, knowing that if he is right, if he builds this constellation, if he can get things up into space, if he can build compute in space, like that will be a $10 trillion or more company. And I'm willing to take that risk. Now,
So it
somebody
sounds
that
like I appreciate that. A lot of teachers say, I can't build wealth because I'm a teacher, but it almost sounds like what you've been saying on this episode is being in education is
allowed me to
allowing you to
build,
build wealth because,
yeah,
you have obviously, I know some people will clap back, and I know elementary is different than high. I'm a high school teacher. I have a 90-minute planning period every day and a 30-minute lunch. If I can't grade and do what I need to do at work, I have an issue. I understand not everybody's in that position. And I am a history, personal finance teacher. It's a little bit easier maybe than math or English, but I'm done at 2:40 every day. I have 2 weeks off for Christmas. I've got 10 days for spring break. I've got every major holiday, teacher work days, 3-day weekends, 2 months off for the summer. You're saying that all this extra time allows you to study the markets. It
yeah,
allows you to get involved. It gives you the security to know that you've got a pension. As long as you don't do anything stupid, you're going to have your teaching job. It's very hard to fire a teacher.
yeah.
There aren't many
I
people
always say
signing up to do it. It's
I've got
giving
to
you
be a
this launch.
criminal. I've got to be a
Yeah,
criminal to
seriously.
lose my job, right?
Yeah.
And it's not something that like, let's just say I make huge mistakes with my finances and I can't retire now. So I can always do my job for 5 more years or 10 more years. It's not like my body's going to give out to the point where I can't teach. Emotionally, teaching is easy for me, right? Other people teaching is very hard for them. Teaching, I could do it in my sleep hungover, right? It's not hard for me. So like that gives me the courage, the confidence to take other risks. And those risks have been what have transformed our financial life. And then I need to add one other thing. I told this to you in the pre-call. Like my wife worked a sales job making less than a teacher made for most of our lives together. And then when our kids got into middle school, she's like, wait a minute, I'm worth more and they don't need me. So she worked her ass off to get into pharmaceutical sales training and going to all these workshops and stuff. And she got into these pharmaceutical sales and that stepped up our income significantly. And then we used that additional money not to expand our lifestyle, but we quite literally plowed that money into the stock market in like 2014, 2017, that those years right there. And those were really good years to be investing in technology now today. And so those investments that we bought during those years when she got that extra money and when I got my master's degree and everything, when we took that extra cash and we bought some really good assets.
So you mentioned before she got the increase in pay with pharmaceutical sales, she was making less than you were as a teacher.
Yes.
Is it fair to say that even though she was making less than you were as a teacher, did you guys still become net worth millionaires before she got the pharmaceutical job, or did that all kind of happen simultaneously, essentially, as her income went up and now everything was working for you?
Yeah, we became net worth millionaires. Shit, let me look at I've got a spreadsheet here real quick. And look at the exact date. Let's see here. 2015. So a couple years after we made that big move with our house, right? So like after we told the banks to go take a hike and give us a haircut, the appreciation of our property then and then the stock market coming back. So the first time I crossed millionaire status was December 8th, 2015.
And
And
that
I
was
had
before she got the big income boost.
yes, yeah, she made the switch over in 2016, 2017. Yeah. And so I'm one of these weirdos. I've had a spreadsheet since October 4th, 2006, where I started tracking my investments and my net worth and equity in my houses and stuff like that. And I've maintained it my entire life since then. And so I had to
It's
refer back.
amazing what happens when you actually pay attention to your finances.
Well,
What's it
and
like for
set
the other
goal
teachers?
and
Yeah,
set goal.
goals.
You
How
know,
about teachers in your building? You guys are making way more than a North Carolina teacher, although the cost of living in San Diego is a lot more. Is it are you guys infected as well in San Diego with the teachers with the woe is me and it
big
can't be
time.
done and we don't make enough?
But then they're the same ones that are driving a new car like every other year too. So like I have a 2016 Jeep Cherokee, right? So I spend money on my boat, I spend money on traveling, I spend money on technology and stuff like that. But I don't spend money on things that don't give me joy. And so some teachers like that nice car is their one big thing that makes them feel like they made it or whatever. And I just look at it as a depreciating asset. So if I'm going to put my money into something, it's going to give me immense joy or it's going to build wealth for me. And that's a mindset that both my wife and I had young, and we're lucky that we had it because it's paying off now. Um, so yeah, like
Any
this.
teachers know your story at work, or are you kind of like
Yeah,
under
like
the radar? Or
no, they didn't know it for a couple of years, but they didn't know it for many years. But a few years ago, the community college we do this thing called dual enrollment, and they asked me to teach dual enrollment personal finance, and I jumped at it because I'd always wanted to teach it, but my school doesn't teach it. And so when we had that opportunity, and I started trying to talk to the kids about money, and most of the kids were like kind of interested in money, but they really didn't care enough. It was just another class. So like I wonder if I show them that I know what I'm talking about instead of just like I'm trying to regurgitate something from a book, what they would
yeah,
do. And so I logged into my portfolios and I showed them how I trade and I showed them my balances. And then all of a sudden now I've got three sections of the class. The class is full, like the kids talk, and now all the teachers are like, it's a little bit of a nice thing and it's a little bit of a resentment thing, but it's they know my situation now. But
have you been able to take any teachers under your wing there at school? Have they come up to you and be like, "Hey, man, can you help me out?" Or how
yeah,
do you do it?
You try to talk to a few of them, I'm a return on investment guy in education and in finance and everything. And when you start talking to people about money, and then they give you kind of the woe is me scenario, or they listen to your advice but then don't take action on the advice, well, then I kind of pull back the amount of time that I invest in. I haven't had a teacher that's come back to me yet where where they've listened and actually done a few things. We do have student resource or school resource officers on my campus. One of the guys is retired. I won't use his name, but he's a retired worker and now he's a resource officer. And he comes into my room and we talk the stocks all the time. And he's actually done it and done well for himself. And it's a lot of fun having him come in and talk to me now. And he's in a situation where he's a doesn't need a lot to be happy, and all he cares about is living something to his daughter. And he is the millionaire next door that you wouldn't guess has a whole lot. And he's built a very impressive nest egg through investing for his daughter. So
That's awesome.
I love hearing his stories when he comes in and he takes the advice. So
Any final
and
words,
acts on it.
advice for our teacher audience here? I know we've covered a lot of things over the last 50 minutes or so. I'm sure we could talk for another hour, but anything else, as we sign off, just as kind of a final message to the educators out there with their finances?
Yeah, don't be afraid to take calculated risks. Those risks pay off and then it allows you to take bigger and bigger risks. So, you know, making that big switch on my house was a huge risk, but I did the research. It made sense to me, so I took it. And then that windfall allowed me to get into the more disruptive companies. And then those disruptive companies exploded. And then that's allowed me to take more risks. So you take some calculated risks, realize that your pension and now Social Security is an amazing safety net. It gives you the chance to reach for that higher rung up in the financial ladder. And then if you need to have a little bit of a reward for the risk you're taking, take it. Spend a little bit of money to reward yourself when you're right, or use a little bit of your investment dollars to buy an asset that you would enjoy using, but then you can also monetize. Um, and then kind of like what you did, like look at the things that you do have, both skills, time, and your properties, your resources, and figure out how you could monetize those when you're not using them or on the nights and weekends, right? If you can add a little extra income from what you're good at, what you're interested in, what you have, and then you use that money to, instead of expand your lifestyle, invest it, you'll be blown away at how fast your net worth raises and eventually your income will follow.
Man, Todd, that was an awesome interview. You left a lot out there. I hope you're willing to come back in the future and give us an update as to what you're up to with whether you retire, whether you don't retire. But there was a lot to chew on there, a lot of risk, a lot of high level stuff. But keep in mind, if you're a teacher and you're going to be in this thing for the 25, 30-year period, Social Security, pension, that does enable you to take the risk. It gives you that time in the summer to go do that side hustle, build the emergency fund, have a solid foundation. We talk a lot in sports that defense wins championships. You've got to have a defense in place first, and then you can go out and you can go do the offense. And that's what Todd did. So, Todd, thank you so much.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Keep up this great work. I think it's really important to show educators that there is a light at the end of the tunnel and you can do more with these resources that teaching provides you. You guys are doing a great job, so keep it up.
Hey, thank you so much. And thanks to all the fit listeners for joining us on this week's version of the Financially Independent Teachers Podcast. We hope you join us for next week. And as always, be frugal, be fearless, and be a lifelong learner. Take care, everybody.